Hello, I'm Marie, and welcome back to how I made my Robe Française project. In this video, I'll show how I trimmed the petticoat and the stomacher. This is the last video in this project series, and I cannot believe we finally made it. This dress is almost done and ready for me to wear to the Outlander ball. It just needs a few final touches. For the trim on the petticoat, I made it the same way as I made the trim that I put on the skirt of the gown. So I used my 4-inch sewing ruler and I traced it onto the fabric, and then I cut it out along those lines. If you are interested in more detail about this process, please go see my video entitled Making My Robe à la Française Part 3, Trimming the Gown. I will link it at the end of this video. This is one of the most challenging dresses I've made to date. Originally, I would have said my German Renaissance dress was most complicated and challenging, but I think it has tied for that position, if not taken the lead. A new trim element that came into play on this petticoat was a giant ruffle. I used a pattern piece to cut it out, and then I sewed the pieces together, hemmed it all the way around, and then I sewed 2 basting stitches about 1 inch apart on the top of this piece of fabric, which will become the ruffle. I purposely left very long tails on the ends of these 2 rows of stitching so that I could pull the tail ends of these strings to gather the fabric and create the ruffle. I will always gather the fabric as tight as it will go, and then that way I can pull the gathers loose evenly across the space that I need the ruffle to fill. I pleated the fabric to hide the seam in the middle of the ruffle. I was really worried it was going to show because, it's in the center of the dress. And I was scared it was going to be very obvious that there's just this ugly giant seam there, but since I pleated the fabric, it hid it very well, and I don't think you can even tell unless you look for it. And even then you can't really tell. And I know it's there. And now you do. But you still really can't see it because of the pleat. I then lined up the bottom edge of the ruffle to the bottom edge of the petticoat, and I pinned it in place. For the trim on the petticoat, I decided to do a fun, squiggly, serpentine-esque style. Several inches above the ruffle, I began to lay out the trim and measure it accordingly so that it was centered and even. Here you can see I am only trimming the center front section of the petticoat. Now some people trim all the way across the front of the petticoat. I'm sure some people trim the back of the petticoat too. I'm not doing that. I am only trimming the front panel of the petticoat, the front center panel of the petticoat, because that's really all that's going to be seen. I was already running scarce on fabric, So this is the only place that it's supposed to be visible. If anything else is visible, something has probably gone wrong. Now it's time to sew on the trim. Just like when I was trimming the gown, I did not want there to be two seams or lines of thread, lines of stitching on the trim, so I just pinned it all together, and then I pinned that to the petticoat. So I pinned the pinned together trim to the petticoat, and then I was just going to sew everything together at one time. Which sounds kind of scary, because it's just, you're just sewing everything at one time, just one fell swoop. But it worked out very well. Time to trim the stomacher. I wanted a smaller scale of trim for the stomacher, so I cut out the strip of fabric that was to become the trim at 2 inches wide to match the size of the trim that was already on the bodice of the gown. I sewed down the narrow hem on either side of the strip. Then I box pleated it. For the stomacher, I decided to do a fun, squiggly, serpentine-esque style that matched the pattern on the petticoat. And I decided to do 3 lines because that is what the fabric allowed for, but also because the rule of 3s. There is a Latin phrase that says unum trium perfectum. I did not study Latin, so that's just my best guess of how that's pronounced. I'm sorry if I butchered it. Which means everything that comes in 3s is perfect, or every set of 3s is complete. And therefore, you see the rule of 3s pop up in writing, art, photography, home decor, and sewing. Because to me, sewing, especially when I'm making a dress like this one, is creating wearable art. Thank you so much for coming on this sewing journey with me. If you would like to see this dress completed, you can do so on my Instagram, which is linked below in the description box, or you can wait a few weeks for the big reveal when I wear this dress to the Outland Ball. Until next time, happy sewing!